Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Savvy. And this year, in 2016, we celebrate the third season. So we're kicking off the third season, and we are in the month of February. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our guest. I'm going to get him to introduce himself in a second. I'll give his name. Vikram Grewal has been on the show before. And the show, as you know, Media Watch, we look at stories across the world, and we have commentating about them. So without further ado, let me introduce you Vikram Grewal. Thank you
for having me on the show again, Savvy. So I work in asset management during the daytime. That's my job and my field. But also I'm the chair of the Young Fabian Finance Network.
That's recently?
Yes, about 3 weeks ago I was elected on a very strong mandate, and the Fabian Society is the oldest political think tank in the world and was one of the founding partners of the Labour Party back in the 1880s. Also, I'm the author of a pamphlet that we're writing about ethnic minorities in politics, in particular within the Labour Party, and I look forward to launching that in March. So.
Great, and then one day we might get more Sikh MPs in Parliament. You know, we follow the footsteps of the Canadians.
Well, I hope so. Right now we have none, which is a real travesty because Sikh people, as you know, add so much value to this country. And for us to not even have one parliamentarian, that's a real shame.
It's a bit of a shame. And it's the first time for a while that's been the situation. Okay, well, we're going to take a couple of stories, and we are going to be joined later on by a guest through a phone-in. He's been on the show before, Mukesh Malhotra, who is a specialist in security, and will be covering the story with regards to accessing your information that you have on your phone, whether it be an iPhone or Android or whatever. We'll talk about that later because we are all about media. And the first story I'd like to cover is the one about Syria. Now, we noticed that in the last few days that there has been some negotiation with regards to having a ceasefire, as the Syrian government forces with Russian backing basically increased their latest assault on the rebel-held Aleppo. Thousands of people have fled to the north of the city and surrounding areas, and we'll show you some pictures soon to show you how bad it actually is out there. And we know that this has been going on for a few years, and we do talk about this subject again and again. But you know, we see also the Turkish border has been closed as well. Now, I wanted to talk about this. I know you've got certain views as well. What's your view? Do you think there ever is going to be a way to, you know, solve this problem? You know, we've seen the winter of people still coming over in boats, you know, people fleeing that country. What can we do to help influence, you know, people in power to bring about that change?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a real atrocity what's happening there, and in particular with Syria, it's a unique example where there's such a complexity within it. There's so many wars within a war, whether it's the Sunnis with the Alawites, whether it's the Kurdish people trying to find a homeland, whether it's fighting a dictator in Assad, and then you have Turkey and Saudi Arabia having their problems with Iran, and that causing friction there, and also a real placid and, quite frankly, a disappointing American front against an insurgent and powerful Russian front, which are very opportunist and using this whole scenario and the weakness of the West to really exploit their alliance with Assad and killing the rebels and attacking them, where a lot of kids and innocent people...
Yeah, we see that with actually some pictures that we're showing up right now. You can see that, you know, there's, you know, this is injuries, and that comment is absolutely right. Injuries caused by years and years of wars, whether it be in the wars, you know, or whether it be, you know, a country fighting another country. You know?
Absolutely, and I mean, we heard this week that 500,000 people, 500,000, are within besieged conditions within Syria, and that's the UN saying that. So they're either under constant threat of being invaded or under armed attack. And these are not 500,000 soldiers or an army. These are human beings like you and I. And I can only imagine what distress those families must be under. And the images that you're showing, there's, you know, all these innocent kids that are dying.
Do you think that it's interesting that the West have actually picked up on being responsible? Obviously, Germany has opened up its borders and said, look, come in and we know we can solve problems. Why do you think the neighbouring countries are not actually doing anything? When you look at, for example, Saudi Arabia there, and this has been commented before, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of people talking about it. And then I heard about the King Abdullah Economic City, a cost of 100 billion. hopefully housing something like 5 million people. 5,000 people have actually now gone to that city.
Sure.
And you think there's 1.2 million Syrians that are displaced. Hey man, let's do the maths, right? 5 minus 1.2, there's still loads of space.
Yeah.
Isn't that, a city that could be welcome to solve these problems?
Well, it's a great question to ask, and I think the neighbouring countries should always take the burden or take a lot of the weight off the shoulders of the other nations. Why are we looking at Europe and America that are not even really connected by land sometimes to take all these Syrians that are dispersed when we have people like Jordan or countries like Jordan there, Turkey, which have now closed their borders to the Kurdish people, which is causing conflict, and also Saudi Arabia, where they have abundance of money. They're not in any economic distresses like some of the European countries, yet they're not taking their fair share. So that's something that really needs to be addressed in the UN, by the right channels, and putting pressure on these people.
Absolutely. And we see another picture here. It's a statement that's been said, we can't live with airstrikes and shelling. Our houses in Syria were hit by 3 strikes and we were all inside. I mean, even if you look at the other situation with the hospital that was hit recently, and this is around a situation where a ceasefire has been declared, but they still wob a bob in there anyway. I mean, what's the situation with that?
So I think it all boils down back to, sadly, Barack Obama. Barack Obama, his whole aim when he went into Syria was to remove Assad. But now, ironically, it seems like Assad will outlast Barack Obama, because the way the Russians have pounced on the indecisiveness of the West, in particular
almost
the
like
US.
Teamed up with Assad, haven't they?
Yeah, so they've teamed up with him, and the West are very much against going in because of their fears of what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, so many failed interventions, that now they're actually afraid of doing what needs to be done in Syria, which is, I mean, I don't mean to bring up, but Jeremy Corbyn also raised this in Parliament when the Parliamentary Labour Party was completely split over airstrikes. But he emphasised on the need for a more democratic and peaceful talks as a way of solution. I'm not saying that there was no need for any armed forces within there, because there absolutely are.
But within his own party, had Hillary Benn saying, you should vote for it, and then obviously that was an influence, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the Labour Party historically has always been a broad church, and debate is always, in my eyes, welcomed, and it's much needed. Not everyone should be singing by the right tune, because then people fail to be accountable, and not everyone's always right. But there needs to be a combination of a democratic solution through speaking to the Kurdish people, speaking to the Sunnis, speaking to the Alawites, speaking to the Turkish people, and getting all of the Western people's allies together and fighting against Assad and Russia, instead of the need for us to just leaving all our allies in those regions fighting against each other, which is currently happening. Do
you think that people are running out of ideas? Do you think the fact that we've got negotiators that... I'm not saying that the negotiators are necessarily inept, or don't have the skills to do it, but they're just running out of options because the dynamics of the region are just too political. It's too possession oriented, and the religious aspects are very difficult as well, aren't they? Exactly.
So, I mean, whenever you involve religion in conflict, it's hugely complicated, and I think it has got really messy, and everyone are really running out of solutions, which is now causing the Sunnis and the rebels to either get into the hands of the jihadis that also have a presence in Syria, or because they'll never surrender to Assad. They'll never ever go to his side and be pro-government and pro-Syria in that way. So, and most of Syria are Sunnis, and obviously Assad has a conflict with Sunnis. So I think what America and the West need to do now is push the terrorist forces to the northwest area and northeast, and allow the Kurdish people, the Sunnis and the rebels, to all finally come together and build some strength instead of being dispersed around Syria, and then actually being an accountable opposition in terms of a governance point of view to Assad.
So do you think that dispersal actually favours so-called Islamic State, that they actually take advantage of that and they can move into regions like Libya and other areas?
Yeah, there's also that factor in that they're left with no other option. When their back's against the wall, they're getting bombed, there's 500,000 people under these kind of pressures. Then naturally they'll give up on the West and the allies that they had before, and they'll go towards a more evil but stronger force in the area. So they really need to come together and be an accountable government and an alternative to Assad and Russia. And we also need to put economic sanctions on Russia through the UN, through other means, and really put pressure on Putin, because he's currently playing a game like it's game theory or a game of chicken with the West, saying, and he's coming there and saying, I'll do what I like because I know that you won't really respond to it. And that's a real shame when that happens.
Okay, so we've got Mukesh, who's going to join us, because related to this point about Syria is obviously the terrible, you would say that in the US there was a problem where there was an internal, there was a couple that caused a lot of violence in a place called, it was actually a chap called Syed Farouk over in San Bernardino. Okay, so the FBI have actually recently asked Apple, you got a connection to Apple when you were doing your masters, you were telling me about it.
Sure.
I've got Mukesh on the phone. Mukesh, welcome to the show.
Hello, young man. How are you doing?
Not bad. Good. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time. We note that the creator of WhatsApp, who now WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. Everybody knows WhatsApp. You use it. I'm sure you do. Says that today our freedom and our liberty is at stake. So obviously, not only have there been problems in the past with regards to the conflict that's happening in Syria, it spreads into other countries. People will take advantage of the freedom that they have to be able to communicate. The FBI want to find a situation where they can actually get into your personal information. What's your view in that? Should they, do you agree with Apple's statement about stopping them from doing that in terms of accessing your personal data?
Well, I think your audience perhaps, have you mentioned to them the fact that what the 4 things the FBI want to be able to do from the discussion?
Tell us about it. Tell us your perspective, because there are 4 areas.
It was the FBI, and I had a little bit of a doubt. I couldn't believe that neither the CIA, the FBI, or the NSA could actually not hack an Apple iPhone. But I did a little bit of hunting around, and what the FBI want to be able to do is they want to prevent the phone from erasing itself. As many of you know, that if you try and get into your phone too many times, everything gets deleted. On the iPhone, it's about 10 attempts, and then that's your loss. And it erases all the personal data on the phone. The other thing is to automate the process for trying out passcode combinations. That way they can attack the phone maybe with 10 to 20,000 possible combinations. That way the phone doesn't destroy itself. And they're asking that Apple should do this without delaying the investigation. And then the final thing is they want to be able to control the process, but not know how it's done.
Okay, Mukesh, I'm going to stop you there. There's a bit of background noise. I'm going to ask Vikram for his view. In the meantime, would you mind moving just slightly to a place that hasn't got that much background noise? Because otherwise, thank you very much. Yeah, Vikram, tell us, what do you think? You used to work for Apple, didn't you, in the good old days, where even Steve Jobs was there, wasn't he?
Yes.
And do you think that they have the right, the FBI, to invade your mobile phone and get into it and find information from it?
Well, as you said, I was a previous employee of Apple, but that wouldn't really make me feel biased in the situation. As Mukesh said, that one of the things that they wanted was, there's 10,000 possible 4-digit combinations someone has to lock their phone.
That's right, I know that.
They want, instead of that being a manual process, the FBI want Apple to make that an automated process to go into the attacker's phone. If he was a terrorist, I'm not sure if he was part of IS, but my view is there's a cynical and optimistic view. The optimistic view is that Apple are actually trying to protect people's freedom. It's almost become a religion or a folklore. As you know, most people around the world now have an Apple phone, and they're moving into regions in Asia like China, and there's more and more users. But also, the slightly cynical point of view is looking at Apple's share price and sales. That's something I do as my day job. And their share price at a 1-year low are not like they used to be. So that could also make me feel like Apple actually want to increase their brand quality more so than what it is right now, and encourage new customers to come into their realm by saying, look, we're fighting against the FBI and the US government to protect your security and your privacy. Okay. And we're not alone. The CEO of WhatsApp, as you said, has come back, and today he made a statement saying our liberty is at question.
Do you think that there's a money-making opportunity here from Apple, where they would say, oh, by the way, if you like your data secured, here's some extra money that you could spend for a vault or something?
Well, there's always avenues like that, but I think it's Apple more so looking at a point of view that if you have an iPhone over an Android phone, even though Google's supporting them as well, but if you have an iPhone, we will fight against the FBI to ensure that your phone stays safe and that no one can really look into your phone. A similar sort of aspect that the snoopers...
But isn't life more important than actually your, I mean, okay, access to your personal information is great, but they are there to try and protect us. So one argument might be the FBI should be able to use that kind of digital forensics to be able to figure out, almost like get to a crime before a crime happens. I'm not talking about Minority Report, but, not as extreme as that. But, get to a point where you can scan. But is that an invasion of your personal liberty and your personal information?
Well, I think Apple, again, with the cynical point of view I was talking about, Apple have accessed someone's phone 70 times already in 2015 under the FBI's orders. So they've done it before. They're familiar with the process and they're happy to do it. And I think other companies like Google and Microsoft are also happy to do it. But I think if the grounds are fair and they actually warrant that kind of action, then there should be a need for that. That's my personal perception of it.
So what we're saying is we don't want a situation where it's carte blanche, you can do it anytime you want to.
Absolutely.
You do it on a per instant basis.
Yeah.
But the point is that monitoring, and we're in a danger territory here when it comes to profiling, because profiling is dangerous.
It is.
You saw the situation with Waris Alawalia. He couldn't get on a flight because of his bug, of his turban, and that was a real injustice. And if you look at the people that have done those kind of crimes before, they've not been the profile that, inverted commas, of what they think a profile of a person who would cause a crime would be.
Exactly.
So even this couple, no one could have thought, model society members, if they had a connection to so-called Islamic State, then no one could have done anything about it anyway, could they?
Well, that's where the whole situation arises now, because even with the Snoopers Charter that was hoping to be introduced under the Conservative government here, that I always believe if a judge and if a court agree that an individual or particular case, there's enough evidence there to show that we can go through this person's personal information, I'm more than happy for that to happen with anyone, even someone like myself. But there is also a danger of stereotyping what we think a dangerous person would be.
Absolutely. Let's get Mukesh back in terms of his view on this. Mukesh,
yeah,
so we talk about profiling, we talk about, a not Minority Report, trying to be proactive on finding out if this crime is going to take place. And that's giving you the Snoopers Charter. What's your view on that?
Well, my view is that it's quite simple, is that we've got a situation here where if they do allow it to, go in and hack into the phone, what I talked to some younger people who were enjoying that sort of ethical hacking, and they say, well, I can hack an iPhone, but the thing is, what Vikram said, back in 2015 or 2014, when they did it before, that was a different iOS system. The new iOS 9 and the newer iPhones have actually got more built-in security. And it is an ethical dilemma which Apple is having to face. And, you talked about this guy from WhatsApp, Jan Koum, who, he's saying very seriously that, our freedom is at liberty, as Vikram said. But I think the future is that with people like Google, like Facebook, Microsoft, Samsung, and in the old days, most terrorists were using BlackBerries, right? Because BlackBerry was the most secure way of talking to each other. And if you go back to the past, that the police have to actually go get BlackBerries so that they could actually intercept or be part of particular groups. And the same thing happens with the iPhone, that all that's happening is that now all the various terrorist groups will say, hey, let's move to the iPhone, the iPhone, whatever the latest one is, 6S or the 7 is coming out, it'll have iOS 9, none of these buggers can get in there. So I think it is a dilemma which Apple is having to face. But if the law courts do say you must do it, I think Apple are on a bit of a dodgy wicket, because they could then suffer a loss of contracts from the US government as well. So they've got to balance, do we service the contracts and not lose millions of pounds, or do we supply the information which the government is saying?
It's an interesting area. I'm going to quote Edward Snowden, who says that whose revelations...
He tweeted, I think, about 12 hours ago.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Well, he says whose revelations about the US government spying provoked Apple's stance on the passcode-protected data. Said the FBI was creating a world where citizens rely on Apple to defend their rights, rather than the other way around. So there is another view on this as well.
Well, there is. I mean, the American, I remember having to ship US-based equipment into certain countries, and we had to seek proof from the US Senate, not the US Senate, from the US government. The challenge was that even if they look at the operating system of what you can do, effectively what it's an FBI operating system, so that the FBI can do anything they like anywhere in the world if they got an Apple phone. So it's not an Apple operating system, it's an FBI operating system, because these organizations want to be able to have access to this. So it's a bit of a worry that we're living in England and the FBI could theoretically hack into our phone and do whatever they like. And that's what many of the people who live in Europe are concerned about in terms of data being sent or held in America, which perhaps they shouldn't be.
Well, there is that rule as well. Mukesh, I'd like to say thanks so much for joining us on the show. Really appreciate it. I know you're really busy today doing all kinds of stuff and no doubt busy in the background. So I'll let you get back to your political affairs. And
thank you, Mike. Thank you, Vikram. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Mukesh.
Thank you, Mukesh. Thank you. So we only have a few minutes left. I did one of the. You mentioned it earlier on. I wanted to talk about it. We only had a few minutes to talk about it. The Oscars, I think, are in a few. Literally days' time, aren't they?
Yeah.
There's been a big controversy about minorities, whatever that means, being represented, which is ironic considering that some of the people who vote on it are minorities as well in terms of the Academy. Yeah. You know, I'd like a movie one day about 1984, you know, and to stand up there and say this is the story, this is the truth, you know. But you got to get some money to produce a movie that can portray that, you know. What's your view on the typical kind of movies that are coming out these days? Is it a reflection of society? Or is it just art for the sake of art?
I think it's a mixture. It's probably going more towards the secondary than the first thing that you mentioned in terms of art and being more of a spectacle. But why are we not in an era now where we're not comfortable with having a James Bond that is maybe an ethnic minority? I mean, Will Smith, he's come out and been very vocal about there not being many ethnic minorities up for awards. Even Idris Elba, and he stood in Parliament and spoke about that. And the great thing about when he stood in Parliament and spoke is that he also hopefully reflected on the parliamentary representation of ethnic minorities, in particular within the Labour Party, which links to my pamphlet that I'm doing for the Young Fabians, because the Labour Party's progression within the ethnic minority area in terms of representation has been abysmal over the past 10-15 years. We had our breakthrough in '84 where we had 4 ethnic minorities come in, and since then we've let the Tories come in, especially under Cameron, and take the lead, and we may possibly see an ethnic minority leader within Sajid Javid or Priti Patel representing the Conservatives. But we've come to an age now, an era, where ethnic minorities are no longer a secondary sort of race. Within so many fields now, even in particular within the Sikh community, we're pioneering so many different areas, different sectors, and even within the filming industry, it's about time there's a recognition that kind of warrants all of that talent. And the fact that there isn't right now, that's the real atrocity across all levels. And I'm glad that something like the Oscars is being made accountable and also being, you know, in a way put in a bad light because of this, because more of this needs to be done for change to come about.
I saw the Ice Cube interview with regard to, you know, his son is in that film, which is Ada Compton, you know, and even he didn't say much, and this is on I think it was on the Graham Norton show, he didn't say much about on the negative side of it. He said it is what it is, or to kind of paraphrase. Maybe to a certain extent too much of a deal has been made out of it, or do you think it really is a point? I mean, Will Smith's wife has said it as well.
Yeah.
You know, there is something there that is, you know, inherently stopping awards or recognition.
Sure.
Do you think there is that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to bore you with my gangster rap knowledge and NWA and the struggles they went through, but Ice Cube, he comes from the era where it is what it is applicable to him. But now it's not for his son and for the era that we're in right now. Yeah. And there is an underlying issue.
The irony being that the screenplay is actually nominated.
Exactly.
Yeah, so,
exactly. So the struggles that NWA went through, where, you know, a group of black guys from a troubled neighborhood, they were under police surveillance all the time. The FBI were investigating them. They were always treated as secondary citizens of their own country. Now I think ethnic minorities across so many sectors are being treated
So I think to a
secondary.
certain extent you can appear confident in the world. You can appear to be a person who says, we will put that to a side. We do not want to be recognised as being, you know, this kind of another group, but we do want to be recognised for who we are and what we've achieved. So I'm afraid we're running out of time, really. Thanks so much for joining us this time around. It was really good. You had a really busy schedule. I really appreciate that. Thanks to Mukesh for phoning in and giving us his guidance, because he is qualified in security and all that jazz. We look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for joining into the show. You can do that also by sending me an email at info@sikhchannel.tv. Until next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.